Welcome to another episode. Today, I'm joined by Spencer, the ecosystem product manager at Arbitrum. Earlier this year, Interop became a hot topic in the Ethereum community, and one of the teams leading the charge was Arbitrum. And today, we'll be discussing what Arbitrum is working on to bring true Interop to the ecosystem. Spencer, thank you for joining me, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So a few months ago, Arbitrum announced like several initiatives to bring true interop for Ethereum and Arbitrum. I'm curious to learn more about the vision behind these plans and the timing as well, right? Like we've been working on interop for the last 4 years, but it was like really good to see the entire ecosystem sort of talking about interop. So I'm curious to learn about Arbitrum's vision for interop in the ecosystem.
Yeah, so I guess we can start by saying that, obviously, I work at Offchain Labs, so we're contributors to the Arbitrum ecosystem, but nothing that we build is canonically automatically consumed into Arbitrum. With that being said, we do have a vision for how we can make interop easier across the Arbitrum ecosystem. So, probably in Q1 of this year, we released a blog post for the Universal Intent Engine. This was heavily based on just some data we saw that the actual demand for interop today can 98% of the time be defined as just cross-chain token transfers and swaps. And we have a lot of this functionality today packaged across a ton of different solutions. We just hadn't seen an L2 stack actually take the initiative to really set this as a standard for the ecosystem itself. So with the universal intent engine, it's built off of this thesis that we don't have to make crazy infrastructural changes to dramatically improve the user experience today. So with that, we focused on intents being an obvious solution when you have providers like Across, Relay, Gas.zip, Aori, all these other ones who are coming in. And right now you can go from, say, base to Arbitrum, Arbitrum to base to Ethereum to Solana in less than 3 seconds by using someone like LI.FI, dBridge, etc. So one of the easiest things we can do there is just lean into those partners super heavily, figure out what their needs are, and then work on tooling and proliferate this across the ecosystem so that if you're launching an application on Arbitrum or any Orbit chain, you know exactly how to actually get these orders filled and abstract the chains going on behind it.
So it sounds like you're reusing a lot of what is already being built, right? Like that used to be one of the concerns in the ecosystem, at least from like the interop side, that all of these teams have worked on building bridges, building like interop solutions for the last 3 years. And then now that the L2s are focusing on interop, will they build in-house solutions or will they like reuse some of this tech? So it sounds like you're going with the approach of making sure that the existing tools are made available to Arbitrum Orbit chains.
Yeah, exactly. Like there were billions and billions of dollars flowing into quote interop protocols over the past few years. And, you know, there's a ton of really complex infrastructural components that went that approach. But then when they actually approach an L2 and say, hey, we want to be integrated into Arbitrum or Base, it's like, okay, so you want us to tie our engineering roadmap with your engineering roadmap and count on you to provide security for the entire ecosystem. And that's a huge risk when you could simply just go with something that works, a smart contract based approach, throw some light escrow contracts in there and still have an almost identical UX.
And I'm curious to learn like what are Arbitrum Orbit chains asking today about Interop? Like what's their understanding today? How do they see Interop today, and like how are you helping them out?
Yeah, so most people are concerned with how they can easily access liquidity that lives on Arbitrum One
Mhm.
and seamlessly allow that to come into their ecosystem. So they're focused a lot on onboarding users and capital from different chains seamlessly to their Orbit chains. There hasn't been a ton of demand for things like cross-chain smart contract calls or this more kind of super chain based interop, I guess you could call it. We just haven't seen a lot of valid use cases for that.
So, I mean, if I understand it correctly, you're saying if a chain launches today with Arbitrum, they're more focused on or more worried about sort of onboarding the initial liquidity and making sure that the onboarding experience is seamless, rather than having like this zone of chains where you can transact easily and like move around without any like friction.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think they do want to be able to have users frictionlessly come into their
Yeah,
chain. They definitely like prefer that these users don't frictionlessly come out of those chains.
it makes sense. And like, what have been some of your challenges in figuring out like how to make the most of interop, right? Because this is such a interop has such a wide surface area. Like oftentimes people don't even know where to start. So what have been some of your challenges and learnings from phase one of like building the universal intents engine?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges was just like actually researching everything that's out there today. Um, Especially with like a proliferation of like different ZK protocols who all come in and say they're solving interop. And then you look at the entire like solver space and trying to understand who's actually filling orders and like what the available liquidity is, what the limitations are, has been interesting. And then you have all the cross-chain messaging protocols such as like Hyperlane or Layer Zero, which are all super useful, but understanding like the security trade-offs and like what's actually going on under the hood of these things besides what they claim they are on their
Mhm.
websites.
I mean, yeah, like I've spent the last 4 years like trying to figure out how these things work, and it's a never-ending problem, right? Like there's always new solutions and just like so much more to look forward to, and like even the docs don't even mention everything specifically, so you have to actually ask questions and then like try out the toolings and everything just to make sure you understand what's going on under the hood.
Yeah, exactly. And like one of the things that we we've really focused on in the past is just making sure that we're not favoring a particular cross-chain messaging system. And if you're building on Arbitrum, we want you to have access to any sort of model you want, whether that's a new token standard or if it's Hyperlane or Layer Zero. We want it to just play super well with the Arbitrum stack. So ultimately the developer can make choices. That being said, by giving them too many choices and not steering them in the right direction, you run into the issue where they just don't do anything at all. So finding that balance between the two has been a challenge as well.
And then, like, if everything goes right with your interop plans, how do you envision the finished UX to look like within the Arbitrum Orbit ecosystem?
So I really want to see the Arbitrum ecosystem a year from now be completely like chain abstracted, whether you're using something like GMX or Camelot. I would really like to see it to where a user doesn't have to like navigate to a third party website, manually click bridge in. The goal is to get it from like explaining to someone who's never touched crypto. It shouldn't take like 2 paragraphs of instructions to tell them how to do something on any Arbitrum chain. I should be able to say it in 2 sentences max. So just trying to, that's kind of the guiding light of how I envision the UX to look. And how we get there is primarily by providing guidance across different like standards, tooling, and making sure that these are available for any Orbit chain day one, but also making sure that application developers are aware of how they can create apps that are truly chain abstracted by leveraging some of the tooling that we put out.
Mhm. And like, so the first phase is about making the most of existing tooling in the ecosystem, but the phase two talks about internalizing interop at the protocol level, right? So what does that look like, and what does that even mean? Like internalizing it at the protocol level. Like, are you thinking about enshrining standards at the Arbitrum chain level, or like I'm curious to know how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so there's still like a lot of stuff that we can't be super public about um, on the second phase of that. But I think if you look at like some of our more recent partnership announcements, like the one with Succinct,
Mhm.
it's just finding out ways to have faster settlement time and generally like easing the experience to where all the stuff from phase one, the intent space stuff, just gets sped up even more with better trust assumptions. So that's really what we're thinking about. by internalizing interop. We don't really
Mhm.
care about value capture or anything like that. We just want Arbitrum to be a very competitive stack for people to build on to where they don't have to worry about what the actual UX feels like.
I mean, Offchain Labs also acquired Zero Dev recently, right? So they're a smart account product, and so smart accounts and like Interop go hand in hand because of the wallet experience, right? So how are you thinking about the UX with smart accounts? Because I feel like one of the problems with smart account adoption has been that apps don't support it, and then because apps don't support it, users don't really demand it, and there's no usage, right? So there's that chicken and egg problem. So I feel like with the acquisition of Zero Dev, that's I feel like another move in that direction of internalizing Interop and like taking more control of the UX features in house.
Yeah, exactly. Like Zero Dev, I think is they have like the second highest number of smart account adoption today.
Mhm.
So we're currently exploring like how we integrate their operations into ours and then go to the market afterwards with this comprehensive product to where if you're building on Arbitrum or you're building your own Orbit chain, you default to exploring something like Zero Dev smart accounts to level up the user experience to another level. I think like if you use a lot of Zero Dev's existing products, you can build an application that is completely chain abstracted and it doesn't even leave a question about interop anymore because there's like no issues with using an app no matter where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think that's the end goal that everyone is talking about at this point. Like nobody wants to um, make the users aware that they're on a chain or like they're on the Arbitrum stack or like I don't know they're within the EVM ecosystem. They people just want to make chains work and like make apps work and abstract all of the complexities. And that's I feel like the definition of true interop at this point.
Yeah, totally agreed. And I think that in the past, like a lot of applications and chains have had to entertain tons of different calls with different providers to figure out what the price is to enable that
Mhm.
kind of experience and figure out what the trade-offs are and like what the competitive advantages are of each provider. If we can completely simplify that process and offer something out of the box that meets all of their needs, I consider that a win.
I also want to talk about the different interop efforts going on in the ecosystem right now, right? So Optimism, of course, has Superchain, ZK has their Elastic chains. Uh, the EF is also working on their own effort. How do you feel about all of these different competing visions to help the ecosystem? Like, do you feel this is net productive, or do you feel like these fragmented efforts kind of like create more confusion than like solutions for the ecosystem?
I think it's fine. I think it does create some confusion. And I think like our approach is a little different in the sense that we're not trying to bootstrap some exclusive club where you have to be approved by governance to be interoperable with everyone. We also
Mhm.
don't want cascading security concerns or high friction like upgrades to the actual like node infrastructure itself. Like they can like Superchain, Elastic Chain, like they can all continue to do these things and it's great for their ecosystem. But our goal is to play well with all of these things because even if you have like a cluster of chains in the super chain, what happens when they want to interoperate with Ethereum mainnet or Solana or the Elastic chain? Then you're still back at square one
Mhm.
and getting a 2020 type experience. So we're trying to like really connect like all these different ecosystems together through smart contracts.
But do you think that vision is shared by all the teams? Because I feel like if even if one team's kind of has a different vision, then we end up creating walled gardens of some sort, right? So do you feel like there will be one dominant model that everyone kind of adopts in the end and like converges that okay, interop is more important than having like shared zone benefits, or will we end up having all of these competing ecosystem specific silos?
I think it will likely end up being competing ecosystem specific silos. But I mean, if you just lean into intents overall, then you can make sure that people can go between those silos very easily. And I think the EF shares a similar vision to that. The EF interoperability calls have been super productive, and have inspired a lot of product vision that we haven't historically seen from the EF. So I'm pretty bullish on them getting involved and making sure that there's some neutral way to communicate across all these chains.
I mean, why do you think it has taken so long for the ecosystem to kind of focus on Interop and take it seriously?
Honestly, like it's I don't know, complacency is one of the biggest battles in like any industry. And I think like the Ethereum community for a long time just thought like they they had it all figured out. No one was
Mhm.
gonna like dethrone them, and like no one has dethroned them. Then there was a wake up call with Solana. It's like, wait, actually, like it's been 5 years. Why has the user experience not improved at all? And how do we? So now it kind of activated them into this catch up mode where it's like, how do we make sure that any L2 and any EVM based chain is as competitive on the UX side as some of these larger monolithic L1s?
Yeah, I mean, when I read the roll-up centric roadmap, it just sounded perfect, right? Like you would have the Ethereum L1 with all the liquidity and all the roll-ups with connected bridges. But then in hindsight, it felt like, okay, there's no way this would have worked with such slow withdrawal periods with bridges, like native bridges and all the costs. And that's why third-party bridges had to be introduced, right? So in hindsight, obviously we have the benefit to see these problems, but I feel like it has taken way longer than it should have for the ecosystem to focus on interop, but I'm glad that it's happening now.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of the new work came from like the actual restructuring at the EF and onboarding the right folks to actually come in and be opinionated about, maybe we should actually fix some things. And, maybe the more productive thing is to actually be public about these things, because in an engineering kind of mindset, it's really hard to publicize what you're actually doing, even if it's something really great. So just having like that increased transparency has completely leveled up at least the public perspective of Ethereum and the rollup centric roadmap.
Mhm. And I feel like interop is also infinite work, right? Like there are always more chains to connect. As a product manager, how do you approach solving this interop puzzle? Like, how do you decide what not to do? Because there are just so many things to work on.
Yeah, I think it takes like hunkering down and focusing on a long-term product view versus chasing like whatever is trending that week on crypto Twitter. Like we have to think a lot bigger than that. But we take it day by day, like right now maybe there's a lot of demand for interoperability with Solana. 5 years from now, what if Monad is on top and then
Mhm.
everyone's like, well, we need Monad now. So just creating these kind of scalable things in an orderly fashion, starting with interoperability within EVM environments, and then as like the actual demand comes in and we have more and more feature requests from some of our partners, then we can prioritize these different ecosystems and making sure assets can transfer smoothly between those.
And if you could give one piece of advice on interop to a new chain launching on Arbitrum, what would it be?
I would say to just not overcomplicate something that is not that complicated. Look at first like what your users actually want to do or what your prospective users would want to do. And it's likely that that's just cross chain token transfers or swaps. They want to be able to use your chain right away without having to navigate to different websites or deal with all these different approvals. So looking at that, you can kind of lean super heavily into existing intent based providers. Today, if you go on Dune, you can figure out which solvers are absolutely killing it right now and just skip everything else and just go talk directly to them, figure out what they offer, and then see how that fits into your product vision.
Mhm. And like, what's that one metric or signal that you're looking at that will tell you Interop is actually working within Arbitrum ecosystem?
I think just more capital inflows in general.
Mhm.
If it's a easier experience to get into any sort of Arbitrum chain, then there will probably be more volume into that chain.
And how do you see Arbitrum's position in crypto today? Like, what role does Arbitrum play, and why should people build on Arbitrum?
I think there's a lot of benefits to building on Arbitrum. Like one is just like the tech itself is super performant. Like we have really fast block times. We have great security. We have a ton of liquidity sitting on Arbitrum. And it's no surprise that even when you see something like Hyperliquid, like the bridge contract is living on Arbitrum, it has like $5 billion of USDC in it. And like just don't believe everything that you're like seeing being publicized on Twitter, and just like look at the hard facts of like this tech stack is super performant. There's a lot of money sitting here. A lot of people trust in the security of Arbitrum. So that should give like a good gesture that it's a great place to build on.
Awesome. Spencer, thanks a lot for your time. And I'm really looking forward to the Li.Fi integration and the launch of the embedded bridge interface. And yeah, like looking forward for the work that Arbitrum does in Interop.
Thanks. Yeah. Looking forward to working with you all as well.